Here is the part 4 of the whole project. This is the most boring and the tedious part of the whole process because you need to dump the gravels, flatten them, and start tempering them down, and repeat the process all the way up till where the expected elevations is built. My in-law was helping me to load up the gravel into the wheelbarrow and wheel them all the way to the entrance of the backyard, and I help him to bring them into the construction site, and then we're going to dump into the trench. And I'll be trying to make them flat, and he's going back to reload another wheelbarrow full of the gravels, and we just repeat the work. Alright, let's give you guys some updates. I fill up like 2 more times of this trench. Every time we're filling like about 2 inches of the gravels, and you can see there's I think my hamper is still there. Yeah, I was all using the manual hampering them down, and also it caused one of my thumb tender I started sore really bad, so I didn't work for 2 days. I just started working again yesterday and today. So we'll start from the left side, laying down the first brick. Oops, my tripod just being knocked over. What did I do is, well, I moved everything to the other corner right now, but when I started here was using my torpedo level. Make sure this side is really level, make sure the surface is pretty level, and also make sure these two are very level as well. Then I bring my string to the top level of my brick, or as close as possible, because that's just a rough reference for me to know where the surface of the wall is going to be. So I lay the 2 of them down, and I moved the T intersection for the drainage. So later on I'm going to bury them down into the gravel, and for the future I'm going to connect the hose or the pipe all the way in the backside of it and bury it a little bit, so it will help us to drain the water. Because one thing's really funny, that when I was standing on here and I was tampering down here, it feels like this bottom we're standing on is more like a very thick slime. So it's like those clay, they absorb the water, especially in this part, I think. So if I go down here, when I pushing down the gravel on that side where I'm standing, I can feel it's coming up a tiny bit. So it's like a wave line of like a slimy, it's like a semi-fluidish like things. So because the soil was so saturated with water, and it's just have way too much water in there. And when we laid down the gravel the first day, the second morning we came back, we saw some of the water already being wicked up. So a portion of it is actually wet. That's a good sign. That means the water is draining out of this area. And also it tells us that the foundation soil is really slimy, like floating. Then that means those gravels on the bottom for the foundation is really necessary. We definitely need to separate the bricks from the foundations, otherwise they're gonna sink down. So yeah, we're just starting. I just putting the 2 blocks here just as one of the end to start it, and in reality I'm actually starting from that end because that's a harder corner to attack. If I can start over there, make sure the corners start very nice and square, and I can follow the string, and the brick wall will be like laying one brick after another, just keep coming down this way. And eventually I might have some wiggle room. I can move the last end piece of the brick. I can turn it outwards, or I can move it inward to finish the corner of it. So this have more giveaway, and that end is really not much of forgiveness for me when I doing the end of it. So I'm going to start laying down the first block over there, which is a pain in the ass to do because the corner of the block is sitting underneath of another block, and that just makes it super hard to do. And plus it's not very deep of foundation here. So this is what we end up with. This is the existing block. I need to slide this block into it with very little room. That's where the challenge I'm facing. So well, let me see how well I can do this job. I probably end up spending more than 2 hours just trying to figure out how to get the first block into position. This is showing how much I was struggling trying to move the block back and forth and left and right, trying to make a level and trying to meet up with the first block in place. and no matter how hard I try, it just won't work. Finally, I realized there's just not enough room for me to put it in, so I pull back the fabric and I dig deeper into the soil, and that way I made more room and slide the first block into position. After I had my first block somewhat in position, I start to line up the second one, just following the string as a reference for the face. When I was working on the second block, trying to make it perfect level, I realized that there wasn't enough space between the blocks and the soil in the back for the drainage holes. So I end up pull back the fabric and dig up more of the soil to make enough room for the drainage pipe to put in later. After having enough space for the drainage pipe, I went back to rebuild my first and second blocks. Again, I was struggling trying to keep everything perfectly level in both longitudinal and the lateral directions, and keep the face of the wall following the string. I did use the tool that I bought from Amazon for the block lifter. It was okay to use, but when you're handling 60 to 80 pounds of the block and working a narrow trench, it was never easy, even with the tool. After they're somewhat in alignment, then I used a rubber mallet, trying to hammer down whoever is a little taller, and also whacking them left and right, trying to make them line up to the string on the face of the block. I was also constantly using the foot-long level, trying to make sure all blocks are level in the same plane. After adding another block, I started to realize I didn't build my foundation high enough. I need to add in more gravels underneath to make it easier for me to lay on the future blocks to keep in the same level. So I actually add another wheelbarrow of the gravel into the trench, and then make the next blocks and the future blocks where it will be, make the elevation a little higher. This is a Friday morning. I started to continue working on the first layer of the retaining wall, and we are 12 days into the projects now. I did took 2 days off due to the sore muscle and tendons, and other days I usually working 4 to 5 hours a day. Luckily, my day job is not so busy, so I can focus more on my backyard project here. This is me working on Friday afternoon. I made a lot of progress today, but in the end, I'm still missing 4 blocks to finish the first layer of the retaining wall. When I made a measurement, the gap is about 68 inches, and the 4 blocks, each of them are 17.5 inch, so in theory, I need a 70 inch to fit them in. Luckily, I did not spend too much effort on the west corner of the retaining wall, because I know that's the loose end. I need to make some adjustment to it. So this is what I accomplished today. Here is the gap for missing 4 blocks, and this is the end that I'm going to make adjustment to make them fit. And I think we didn't order enough of the gravels, 2 cubic yard, and we already used up 1 cubic yard, only fill up the bottom of the trench. That's only 6 inches deep. So I still have 3 layers of retaining wall blocks to be filled. At least it needs half of the space. So we will try to sift more of the old gravels, see if we can reuse them and reduce the material cost, and see how that's going to work out. Stay tuned for more updates later.